You're listening to Salford City Radio 94.4 FM, the Friday Sports Show, with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi. Bringing news from the local area and around the world. The aim of the show is to increase participation and awareness of sport. We aim to bring Salford to the world to Salford. We have a really passionate audience around sport, and even people who aren't particularly interested in sport, I think, really enjoy the interviews. We interview some of the world's best athletes, sports people, coaches, some of the most leading people in the field of psychology. It's been interesting to hear what their views are. Today we have a fascinating guest, a sport that's a fantastic sport that I definitely sort of tune in and watch myself as often as I can, particularly in the major tournaments. He's going to give us a bit of insight into a fascinating sport, and equally a sport that sort of is relatively strong in Britain as well. So, the show is about increasing awareness and keeping sports throughout the year, so we're not just sort of focusing on sports in the major tournaments, the Olympics and sort of major events throughout the year. Get involved, get out there and participate. Our guest today is the High Performance Director of Belgian Hockey Federation, and he has a wealth of experience in the sport of hockey. Adam Commens, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Yeah, great to be on the show.
Adam, so if we sort of start at the beginning with yourself, how did you get into the high performance role that you do? What inspired you to go into hockey to begin with, and how did you get into the high performance role?
Yeah, obviously, as with a lot of young people, they get into the sport because their parents are involved in it, and I started at a really young age playing hockey, and I had a long career internationally, and I always had an interest in coaching, and I did a Bachelor of Physical and Health Education, and I thought, I'd love to coach and rather than maybe teach, and I did that for many years, and then the natural progression went to coaching coaches, and I suppose that's what I do now as the High Performance Director of the Belgian Hockey Federation.
Yeah, and how was the transition from being a player to sort of coaching? How did you find that? Some people sort of make it's a natural transition, some people kind of struggle. What would you say your experience was to go from being a performer into a coaching role?
I think I could say it felt natural at the time, and I went from being in the Australian squad in the lead up to the Athens Olympics in 2004 to being head coach of the Belgian team in 2008. So within one Olympiad, I went from playing to coaching, and it did feel natural. But when I have a look back on my coaching career, you realise how probably naive I was at the time, and I was probably just a hockey expert telling my knowledge around hockey, and I didn't really have a true identity as a coach at that stage. And it's probably now, 15 years later, that you realise the journey that you have to go through as a leader and the amount of things that go behind it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and sort of a topic we've discussed on the show before around sort of coaching, how being a sort of top performer in the field and sort of going to coaching there's different qualities that one, like you sort of reflected on, the leadership. And is that something that you sort of learned? Did you you mentioned sort of studying? Was it a combination of sort of learning through studying, experience, or just all those things put together sort of help develop to where you are now?
Well, I think you need to have a continual passion for learning, and that's something that I've tried to maintain throughout my career. I've never been someone that thought I had it worked out. I was always looking to maybe find the edge or look for ways that I could be more successful as a coach. And I suppose, we need to define what does success look like. And for me, if I can create an environment where the athletes are able to flourish, where they're enjoying themselves and we have a good connection, then that's a really successful environment. But it's taken me a long time to even get to that stage where I was able to look past winning and looking at how do we create a really innovative, creative, enjoyable and environment that everybody is able to bring the best out of themselves.
Absolutely. And what would you say some of the challenges have been for yourself, Adam, in sort of your own career, going into the role you are? Obviously, we all sort of have, various sort of challenges. What would you say some of the sort of challenges that sort of you had on your path?
I think one of the biggest challenges for sports like hockey is that we're largely funded by the government or by the stakeholders that we have, and that's in countries such as England, Australia, and here in Belgium. And so the continual need for high-level results to maintain that funding puts a lot of pressure on the coaches to maybe pick or select athletes that you think will get you a result rather than what is best for the team in the longer term, so like that development phase. And with that in mind, are we able to, as coaches, take the time to develop ourselves and to try new things or different things, to dive into areas which maybe we may not have gone into because we wanted to keep it safe and not sort of take too many risks in the need for getting those results. And it's been one of the biggest challenges for me as a coach, and something that now as a performance director I try to encourage my coaches to look outside the box and to dive into an area which is maybe unknown in a way to develop themselves as coaches, but also to take the team to another level.
Yeah, and absolutely. And in terms of sort of highlights, like some of your highlights, I'm sure there's plenty of them there, but I suppose what sort of sticks to mind, Adam, in your own sort of career, any sort of specific highlights that sort of come to mind?
Well, if you look at results, I think when I worked with the Australian women's team, we were ranked 7 when we started, and we ended up, I think, at one stage making the final of 10 tournaments in a row. And and we created a really quite vibrant environment there where the athletes were able to lift the level of performance. But probably with that highlight, then we didn't achieve success at the Olympics in 2016, and that loss, if you like, sort of led me to explore my coaching and why was it, and what type of responsibility can I take as a head coach for that result. And I think that the last 7 years for me has been a huge area for growth. And if I'm to talk about highlights, I've learned so much in the last 7 years exploring different head coaches, from not only the ones that I work with here in Belgium, but also coaches in other sports or other nations, and looking at what makes a quality leader. And I think that's probably been the highlight for me, is working with a team like the Belgian Red Lions that have won a World Cup, an Olympic Games gold medal, and a European Championship, and seeing the staff of that team work and being part of that and exploring different things. That's been a real highlight for me, and certainly helped me develop to become even a better coach and leader than I was in my earlier days of my career.
That's really interesting. In terms of, I know it's obviously in the short time we have, it's probably hard to sort of, and I'm sure that there's many variables. But I mean, what do you think are the key things? I mean, like you mentioned there, say Australia was 7th, then obviously they had that run where just looked from the outside looking in. I'm sure that it might have been different in sort of coaching, but from the outside looking in, they looked literally unbeatable for a long period of time. As you mentioned, Belgium there. They're really, really strong. I mean, what are the sort of key things, I suppose? I'm sort of thinking in the context of, we have coaches listening, and I'll probably take a few notes myself, to be fair. What are the sort of key things to take a team, like you've mentioned there, from 7th to go on and be a winning? Is it a psychological thing, physical, coaching? What do you think is the key for that, Adam?
Yeah, look, I think there's a basis that you need to get right with all teams to have a certain level of success. And probably as a younger coach, I focused a lot on getting the basics right. But here in Belgium now, we have 6 sort of steps that we look at, and the first one is around what does it mean to be part of the Belgian team, and what are you coming into, what's the history behind the team, what is the history behind the organisation, and how important it is, and we try to make sure our athletes feel at home and they belong. The next step for us is to make sure that we're really well physically prepared and we're able to talk with short, succinct messages to each other, and that we were able to accept that feedback. The third step, we have a certain structure, and there's certain expectations that we have of each other. The fourth step is around strategy and winning, and ensuring that we understand that what we need to be able to do to get that success on the pitch. The fifth step is around connection, ensuring that we really understand people that we work with deeply, and that trust. And finally, we want to be innovative and creative, and that's, as a performance director, quite often you'll see coaches that are really strong in the technical, tactical area, that they're very strong in terms of structure, and clear rules and order and expectations, but maybe they might lack a certain level of connection with their players, that relationship of trust and building that trust. A lot of coaches say that's really important. Yeah. Do they know how to build it?
Absolutely.
And are they authentic in that? And this is something that we really value a lot at the Belgian Hockey Federation, and you know, just being able to demonstrate that you care about the person behind the athlete, I think is something that we quite often overlook, because I say, you know, at Olympic level, all coaches will usually, you know, they have a pretty decent culture, they have their team physically well prepared, they have great basics and a certain way of play, and they're pretty good strategists. I think right on top level, what makes some coaches stand out from others is that connection that they have with the team that they're coaching, and having that innate trust from the players to the coach. And I think from what I've witnessed over the last 6 or 7 years, that's been a major driving factor or force behind the success of the Belgian men's hockey team.
Absolutely, no, that's really fascinating stuff. I've sort of taken a few notes down myself there, and I think that's, you know, some really, really key points there. You know, particularly like, you know, like what does it mean to be a member that's like play for the team or for the club, and I think that they're sort of points that anyone can sort of, you know, like cherry pick what's right for them in any environment, not just in sport. I think that's sort of, you know, it does build that sort of culture. Just out of interest in terms of the playing pool, like, it might be outside, obviously, sort of your remit, I don't know. And what's the sort of like, in terms of like the pathway to get to the national team in Belgium for hockey? Is there like, what's the sort of, is there sort of a pathway that, like a structure in terms of you go through to get selected nationally? Internationally? Yeah,
there is, and we like to think that we've got a pretty reasonable talent identification pathway. So obviously the first introduction into the sport comes via a club, so you join in a club somewhere, and we have from under 13s, we have what we call a district. So we have Belgium is split into 6 districts, and every club in each district can nominate players to try out for their district team, and then the athletes are selected into the district team, and the 6 districts play against each other, and then from that we select a national team. And that's not uncommon. That's very similar to, I would think, most nations, how they identify and select their national teams. I think where we differ from other nations is that once the teams are selected at U14, U15 level, we still leave it open for clubs to nominate players to come and trial for the national team. And we try to keep the net as wide as possible. We try to keep giving opportunities to players so we don't miss anyone.
That's really interesting.
Not that if you're not identified at 14, that's it, it's over for you. You know, we sometimes pick people from just club performances, even at the senior level, you know, and there have been players come in much later in their development pathway.
Yeah, and that's really interesting stuff. I mean, I sort of like that's something sort of like I thought about in a football perspective, where, you know, Belgium's over the last however many years has produced so many fantastic footballers, and you know, and I suppose like looking at the hockey side of things, it kind of starts to make sense in terms of the opportunity for players who sometimes, you know, we all develop at different sort of different ratios really, so it gives you the opportunity to come back. And in terms of the domestic competition, how would you say, what's that like, the actual domestic competition, Adam, in Belgium? Is that like, how I know it's difficult to compare different sort of countries, but where would you say that is the domestic competition in terms of, is there an opportunity to like play different teams from different countries, or is it just international fixtures?
Yeah, so our domestic league, we have a league like most nations. You know, we have 12 top clubs in the men's and women's side, and they play just within. Belgium, of course, there's the European Hockey League, which is like the Champions League in football. It runs at different times during the year that top Belgian clubs play in. And then if you're to play internationally, that's just with the national team. Yeah. I think one of the things that's really helped Belgium, not only in hockey but also in football, is that it's a small nation. So the national teams can train together on a weekly basis. Okay. Yeah, every week. You can't do that in Germany. It's too big a nation, and you can't do that in Australia, and even the Netherlands is more difficult. But we can drive from one side of the country to the other in 2 hours. So our national teams get together each week, and they train every week around their club training. So we're able to have the best athletes training with each other on a weekly basis, and that really helps with their development.
Yeah, and in terms of the Champions League, Adam, is there sort of a specific, country that tends to do well in that Champions League? Like, are the honours kind of shared regularly, or how does that sort of? What's the sort of? How does that sort of work in terms of?
It's been spread, but the winners have only come from the Netherlands and Germany. And Belgium. One of the Belgian clubs won a few years back. Beating a German club in the final. I would say probably the Netherlands, their top clubs have won most often. Split between the Germans and the Dutch clubs. I think the Belgian league has grown immensely since the success of our national side. We'll probably see one of the top Belgian clubs in the Final Four each year. There might be two Dutch clubs and a German club. The English clubs have maybe enjoyed not as much success. I think one of their teams made the semi-finals last year, but invariably it's split between the Dutch, the Germans and the Belgian clubs. They're probably the most professional leagues in terms of funding also.
Oh, okay, and do you get, like, say, in are they generally like homegrown players? Is it like football where you get players coming in from overseas to play as well?
We have a lot of Argentinian players in Belgium. We have some English players at the moment. We have Australian players here. It's pretty multicultural, and going back a couple of years, I think one of the clubs in the Netherlands, Bloemendaal, had, I would say, 5 out of the top 10 players in the world in one club, and they dominated that particular competition for a number of years. So it's like football, but unfortunately not the same level of financial reward. Of course,
definitely. I don't think there's too many sports out there, definitely, that have that.
But if you can play your sport professionally and you can earn a living from it, then it's pretty good.
Absolutely, it's the dream, isn't it?
Players are fully rich from it, but they can survive,
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, and that's the thing. I think it's sort of, it's a big opportunity where you sort of like to, and I suppose, like, the opportunity to sort of play for their country as well is huge too. But, and just sort of like in terms of your own vision, obviously, sort of, no doubt there's more success. Is there anything you can share to listen in terms of, like, where do you sort of see things from? I suppose you got the Olympics or other major tournaments. Is there sort of any sort of thoughts in terms of your own sort of vision, more of the same, Adam, or?
Look, I think the big challenge for us in Belgium is to get our women's team to have the same success as our men's. We've moved from ranked 24 in 2007. I think we're ranked 6 at the moment. We've moved up pretty rapidly in the last few years, from sort of 14, 15 up to 6. Became 6 at the World Cup. Our aim is to be on the podium in Paris. Some point quite some energy in working with the staff of the women's team as well to build that side. It's a really young team, so that's one of our objectives, and the other one is to continue to grow the sport. I think 20,000 members playing hockey in Belgium in 2007, and now close to 60,000.
Wow, yeah.
We'd love to be the number one women's team sport in Belgium. That's an objective we have. We think if we could, be consistently on the podium, that can lead to more young female players playing our game and building it that way. And there's some pretty lofty objectives, but things that make my role really interesting and help me get out of bed each day and strive for a bit more. And of course, with our men's team, sustained success. It's one thing to make 2 Olympic finals in a row. If we can get a third one in Paris, that would be really, that shows that we've got longevity, not just a golden generation.
Absolutely, the expectation changes, I suppose, to a certain extent too. But that's amazing stuff what you're doing there. Adam, it's really kind of you to join us on the show. It's been fascinating. Now that listeners sort of tuning in, I think regardless of what sport you play, there's plenty of things to sort of take away from some of the insights that you give there. So I really want to thank you for coming aboard the show. It's been great speaking to us, Adam Commens, who was kind enough to join us on the Friday Sports Show, Salford City Radio 94.4 FM, High Performance Director at Belgian Hockey Federation. Fantastic insights into what he does. No doubt there's a lot more to it than that. There's only so much we can cover in the short time we have. But thanks everyone for listening. The aim of the show is to increase participation and awareness of sport.